saw something on my morning walk. This was a few years ago, but it really stuck with me just for how strange it was. And I'm hoping this is the proper place to put it, as my encounter was with a humanoid being. Anyway, I was heading out of my house at around 6 a.m. It was summer, so I took my walks at sunrise to avoid the daytime heat. I had done this many times and had my walk down to a science. Just my muscle memory could get me through. So shortly after leaving my home, I'm heading up this road toward the highway. I lived behind a school, so I was very aware of the roads and vehicles, even if I was distracted by something else, which I was. As I walked down this road, I was going through playlists on my MP3 player. I was almost right on the first intersecting road by the time I found out what I wanted to listen to and looked up. Everything was normal, and there were no cars to be seen, which made sense since it was a Saturday morning. So I continued up toward the highway where there was a sidewalk. But about 3 intersections from the highway, I noticed a shadow in the school zone sign ahead of me. Figuring it was mine, I just kept walking. I was only 2 intersections away when a disturbing thought hit me. I was walking east. There was no way that shadow belonged to me. And since there was absolutely no one around, there was no way on earth that shadow was really a shadow. And as if it could read my thoughts in sudden fear, a figure stepped out into the intersection right behind the school. And the only thing I can figure that it was a gray alien. It had all the features. Spiny limbs, enormous head, gigantic black eyes, and barely a nose, ears, or lips to speak of. For anyone else, this would have been time to panic and run, but my military training kicked in. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it wanted. But I knew it had no place this close to my home and my children. So I charged at it, hoping the very least to run it off, or better still, find some way to capture it. Of course, under both of those desires, I wanted to kill it. To this day, I don't know why I wanted to kill it. Maybe it was a part of my training that had stuck into my brain. Or maybe it was because this being was undoubtedly a threat, at least in my mind. I don't think aliens come all this way to our neck of the intergalactic woods just to hide behind signs. There was something going on here, and I had to fix it. The next thing I know, I'm standing in the intersection. The creature was gone. Naturally, I was confused. The sun was higher than it should have been, and a quick glance at my MP3 player showed that I'd missed at least 10 songs. By my best guess, I was missing nearly half an hour of time. Now scared and disoriented, I turned back and walked home. It was already getting hot, and heat stroke was not going to help me sort out everything that had just happened. I haven't told this story to anyone other than my parents and a single friend. We all agreed that this was something strange, and that whatever it was definitely not right. Not even now, years later, I wonder what I really saw. Was it really an alien? Did I honestly try to capture and kill an actual extraterrestrial? I don't have those answers, and that scares me. But one thing is, I don't think I got abducted. I don't have weird dreams, and I couldn't find any mysterious marks anywhere on my body. The only thing that I can't explain is a painful feeling in my upper left arm. It feels like there is something in there, but X-rays have shown nothing. Could it be that I was tagged by this creature the same way we tag animals for study? Another question I can't answer, and that scares the daylights out of me. This pain has not gone away, but I have become accustomed to it. Maybe one day, I'll be able to get better scans of my arm and see if maybe a different machine could see what the X-rays couldn't. If you have any ideas that you think might help me out, let me know. I'm open to anything, and any opinion is welcome. Even if it is just to call me stupid for trying to catch an alien with my bare hands. If someone else has had a similar experience, I'd like to hear about it. Maybe you can help me find some answers. Since the incident, I have been having paranoid episodes when I feel something lurking behind me no matter where I'm looking. The odd thing is that I have one of these episodes every day or two. But now that I've moved to a new home on the other side of town, I haven't had a single episode in over 2 weeks. I think that might be related. A pale-looking humanoid. I have been in a long-distance relationship with my girlfriend for a couple of years. And every summer and winter break I'm able to travel to go see her. This encounter happened about 2 years ago at my girlfriend's house. I should mention that my girlfriend lives on the outskirts of her city in Mexico, where houses are around 200 to 300 yards apart and surrounded by dense woods. Usually, days and nights there go about peacefully, accompanied by the sound of the woods and the occasional car passing by from others who live nearby. I had always considered her place to be perfect to spend time outdoors. Until this occasion, honestly. I don't think I have ever been this scared in my life. This sighting will be carved in my mind forever. On a chilly night of December, I was at my girlfriend's house. I'd planned to spend the night with her since she would have been by herself that day. Her mom was out of town and she didn't want her to stay by herself either. We were having dinner in the kitchen at around 8 p.m. We chatted about activities we could do tomorrow, tasks her mom had asked her to do, how much we missed each other, among others. After about an hour of conversation and laughs, we decided to go into the living room and cuddle on the couch, watching TV. We both got up and put the dishes in the sink. She went into her bedroom and I went outside to the bathroom. The house layout consisted of a long corridor that connected pretty much every room in the house, and a back door at the end of the corridor which led to the patio. The patio was open, full of trees, plants, and the only thing separating the patio from the woods was a fence made up of stones and barbed wire that stood at around 1 meter tall. Halfway down the patio there was the bathroom, being lit by a single and weak light bulb, so if anybody wanted to go, they had to walk outside, even if it had to be in the middle of the night. I'm not coming here at night, I thought. I remember when I opened the back door and stepped into the patio. A cold breeze stroked my face and sent shivers across my back. So I hurried to go back as quickly as possible because, to be honest, I was a little spooked going outside in the darkness, knowing that the woods were pretty much a few steps away. I finished doing my business, washed my hands, and started walking back, being careful not to trip on something because the light bulb was almost non-existent. I was about halfway when I heard a noise to my left, like someone stepped on a branch and broke it. I stopped and quickly turned, trying to see what made the noise, but I could only see a portion of the fence and nothing but darkness beyond that. However, I had this weird feeling that someone or something was watching me, something on the other side of the fence. I stood there in silence for around 30 seconds, listening to the surroundings, only to notice the crickets had stopped chirping. I got a bit freaked out because I knew for sure they were chirping when I first got out. I was somewhat scared to move, but I did anyways, almost running to get inside as soon as possible. When I returned, I went to my girlfriend who was already in the living room, laying down on the couch, the blanket on top. She noticed I was a bit agitated and asked me what was wrong. "Your patio was scary," I jokingly said, not wanting to tell her what I felt because she hates anything that has to do with horror or scary stuff. I decided to brush it off, so I went around the couch and sat on the other end of it, putting my girlfriend's legs on my lap, and asking what she was watching on the TV. I turned to my right and noticed there was a huge window on one side of the wall that gave me a perfect view of the patio. I didn't see it before because it was next to a cabinet, being covered on the way into the living room. Now that I knew about it, I kept turning to see outside, still thinking how scary it looked. As we were watching a boring documentary, I took off my girlfriend's socks and started to rub her feet below the blanket. After all, it was a chilly night and her feet were cold. We didn't have conversation. I was getting sleepy, but after around 20 minutes, I started hearing noises outside. Noises that seemed to be coming from the patio. I grabbed the controller and muted the TV to make sure I was hearing right, and I was. It sounded like tiny twigs breaking and grass being brushed. I quickly turned to my right to see outside the window, but I could only see the plants and part of the trunk from a big tree. The noise, although faint, stopped for a few seconds, resumed a few moments later, and stopped again. I stood frozen watching outside the window, almost as if waiting for a thing to appear. "What is that noise?" I whispered to my girlfriend. But after I didn't get a reply, I turned around and stood up a little to see that she had her eyes closed and had fallen asleep. I was a bit freaked out, but I chose to believe it was probably a coyote or some other animal that lurks around in the woods at night. I kept watching the TV muted, waiting for the noise to start again. But after a while I realized it had stopped. I turned around one more time to see outside the window, and I felt my heart sink to my stomach. The first thing I noticed when I looked outside that time was a faint image of a gray, pale, and tall humanoid figure, peeking from the side of the big tree trunk, staring right back at me. I suddenly froze in fear, not wanting to even slightly move or breathe. I watched this thing as it watched me, even though I couldn't see its eyes because of the poor lighting, but I knew it was watching me. I knew it was aware of me. I somehow felt it. The creature was, like I said, pale, really pale. I could see the contrast between its skin and the bark of the tree. The creature was very thin, had really skinny shoulders and torso, as well as an elongated neck. It looked like it was around 6 or 7 feet tall. Unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, I could not distinguish in detail any facial features because of how dark it was. But I could perfectly picture in my head the shadowy areas around where eyes would be for a person, and a huge other one where the mouth would be. It was sort of grinning. At this point I was trembling a little, and I wanted to let my girlfriend know what I was witnessing. But I didn't want to move a muscle or break eye contact with that thing. I felt like I needed to remain still or play dead to lose its attention, but no. The creature kept staring at me, not moving an inch, like it was trying to do the same. Then, to turn things worse, the creature started to make echoey clicking sounds, kind of like a frog, but slower. I noticed it began to turn its head to its left side and turn back to look at me really fast. I didn't know what to think anymore. All I wanted was my girlfriend to wake up and prove to me that this thing was real. I began whispering her name in between my teeth and mouth, not even wanting to move my jaw, but she wouldn't wake up. And the thing kept doing the same, turning its head to the left and back to me really fast. The creature crouched kind of like when big predator cats are hunting and lay low, preparing to attack. "What the fuck?" I whispered. I know, stupid. I didn't even think through the fact that if I woke my girlfriend up, she would start moving, and that thing would notice both of us. But I was so scared that I kept trying. This went around for maybe less than 15 minutes before I realized I still had my girlfriend's foot in my hand below the blanket, so the thing would not be able to see me moving. Only using my wrist, I slightly pulled her foot back and forth, whispering her name again and again, but no response. Then I stood in shock when I saw the creature stand up again and start walking backwards, still looking at me, and disappearing into the darkness of the patio, doing the clicking sounds again. I blinked a few times, realizing my eyes itched from staring at the creature this whole time. For some reason, I couldn't turn my head around. I kept looking in the direction where the creature disappeared, listening for sounds, and waiting for it to appear once again. A few minutes passed and I took the chance to turn around, slowly. As if in slow motion, I turned my head to my girlfriend and started calling her name louder, while pushing her leg and quickly scribbling my fingers on the sole of her foot to wake her up fast. Her foot jerked and she started turning. I stood up to her shoulders and patted her, whispering, "Hey, wake up, baby." She opened her eyes and squinted at me, adjusting to the line of the TV, wondering why I'd woken her up. I kept telling her to remain still and silent when I heard the sound again. She looked at me, noticed the concern in my eyes, and asked, "What's wrong?" "Shh. Be quiet," I followed, putting 2 fingers on her lips and looking into her eyes. I could see she was getting freaked out, and I don't blame her. I would be too if someone woke me up, looking scared and telling me to be quiet. The clicking sound went off again, but it was louder this time. Almost as if that thing was on the other side of the window. This time, both of us heard the noise, and we stood looking at each other in silence, getting more and more scared. "What is that?" my girlfriend asked, but I remained quiet. Again, in slow motion, I started to turn my head to the window to check, and there it was. The thing was right outside the window, only a couple of feet away, and staring right back at me. This time, I had a clearer vision of how it looked. I was wrong. I was petrified in fear when I noticed it didn't have a mouth where a person would have it. Instead, the mouth was on its neck, which opened horizontally, not vertically. As its mouth opened, it vibrated with the clicking sounds, and hundreds of really small, razor-like teeth shined with the window glare. It had oval-shaped eyes that were as dark as the night. I felt its gaze pierce through my soul. I started shaking and breathing faster, not believing what I was seeing. My girlfriend peeked by my side to see what I was looking at, and I instantly felt her body tense up under me as she started to ask me in a trembling voice what that thing was. But no answer came out of me. Now we were both scared to even move a muscle. After the humanoid noticed my girlfriend move, it gave a step forward and lowered its head, almost as if it was scanning us. We jumped in fear after seeing the thing doing it because we thought it would start coming towards us. My heart was pounding so fast I thought I could faint any time. Then the thing began to walk slowly to its right side, in the direction where the door to the corridor was, resuming the clicking sounds. If you have seen the movie Signs and remember the scene where the humanoid came out of the bushes outside the house, that would be an accurate representation of what we saw. We took a good look at every inch of that thing's body. It walked with its head turned to us. After we lost sight of it through the window, we both sat up and looked at each other when suddenly, we heard something scratch the metal door that led to the corridor, as if the thing was grazing its fingers on it. Without thinking twice, I grabbed my girlfriend's wrist and jolted out of the living room, locking ourselves in her bedroom. We sat on the floor right next to the bedroom, hiding in case that thing got inside. The scratching sounds continued and my girlfriend started to sob, still asking about what we saw. I felt powerless knowing I couldn't do much to reassure her. I could only hold to her and hope for the thing to leave and give up. The noise continued for about 3 minutes when it suddenly stopped. Then we began hearing footstep noises all around the house, so we kept turning to whatever direction we heard the noise coming from. Eventually the noises stopped, and after an hour or so, we figured the creature had left. My girlfriend, still with tears in her eyes, told me if we could lay in bed. I agreed because my back was hurting from being in that crouched position for over an hour. We slowly crawled into bed, making the least noise possible, and covering ourselves with another blanket. "Don't worry, baby, everything is going to be okay tomorrow. Try to get some sleep," I told her as I tightened my grip around her. She didn't reply, but after a while she fell asleep again. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. I kept my eyes opened, listening to every sound around us. The next day, we didn't even want to touch the subject. All we said was that the creature was not from this world. My girlfriend said she felt the creature's gaze pierce into her, almost as if that thing was feeling with its pure sight. Nothing else was said. We were left sort of traumatized. I realized she was going to have to put up with that fear of going outside in the future. And I didn't want that thing anywhere near her again, or her family. Days after the encounter, we both suffered from nightmares. She mentions that she sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, screaming and trembling, and wouldn't be able to stop until her mom went to check on her. The fences that separated the patio and the woods have been redone since. They now stand at 2 meters tall, blocking any easy access from the woods. Before this, they had to make sure they didn't have to go outside at night. They haven't had any of their encounters lately, but my girlfriend insists that the patio gives her chills at night. I keep wondering what that thing was, that humanoid creature. Maybe an alien. My brother and I were almost kidnapped by hillbillies in Walmart when I was 10. So this happened about 13 years ago. I was 10 at the time, my brother was 8. We had just moved to a new town that year, and the Walmart here had this sweet arcade up near the service desk. So every time my parents would bring us grocery shopping, they'd give us each a few dollars and let us play in the arcade. The town had an incredibly low crime rate, and the arcade is at the front of the store where dozens of people are checking out. So what could possibly go wrong? My brother is playing the claw machine while I'm standing on the side of the machine, trying to help him angle the claw perfectly above a stuffed animal he's trying to get. Suddenly, this random hillbilly walks up to the claw machine next to us, inserts a quarter and begins moving the claw around. But for most of this time, he's making eye contact with my brother and smiling, not even watching the game. He's not talking to us, just staring and smiling. He has long, thin brown and silver hair, pulled back in a loose ponytail at the base of his skull, a camo trucker hat, and a long, scraggly beard. I remember vividly the way he smelled. Stale beer, ashtray, and something that smelled like a sweet yet sour dirt or fungus. He tries making small talk with my brother and I, who were raised to be aware of strangers, but still to be polite. Eventually we got bored of the game we're playing, and I usher my brother to follow me to a new game, on the opposite side of the arcade. A few seconds later, the man follows us, stationing himself once again at the claw machine next to us. At some point, an overweight lady walks in and says to the hillbilly, "What are you doing to these little kids?" and snickers at me. He replies, "I'm trying to win them some stuffed animals." She then begins playing the claw on the other side of us, so that my brother and I are sandwiched between these two strange hillbillies. His comment comes across as weird to me, because previously I thought he was maybe trying to win something for his kids, but this entire time, he'd just been following my brother and I from game to game, trying to win us toys. This has been going on for maybe 20 minutes at this point. They followed us to several different machines and spent a lot of money. The games were all 25 cents per play. Each time my brother and I switched machines, they'd follow us. The hillbilly says to the lady, "I'm out of money. You got any?" She says, "Nah, I'm broke too." My brother says, "I have $1 still." Now this is the part that really scared me. I remember listening to these two talk about some weird things with us, asking if I have a boyfriend, asking where we go to school, where our parents work, asking if we've ever done drugs, etc. But when my brother said he had $1, she responded with the most terrifying thing I'd heard from them yet. The woman suddenly bursts out, "Well shit, then give it to him, boy!" Her face was red. The tone in which she shouted was so ear-piercing and gut-wrenching that I could feel the blood drain from my face. My brother looked like he was about to cry. He hands her the $1 and her face lights up. She laughs it off, almost like she's trying to make it seem like she was joking when she yelled at us. My father walks up a couple of minutes later. As I turn to tell him that these people have spent close to $15 to win toys for us, they leave hurriedly. Before he gets a good look at him, my dad is livid. He takes us up to the front desk and tells them what I told him. They make an announcement on the intercom to keep an eye out for these people, and to report to an employee if they see them. Then they call the police. I don't actually remember this part or much of anything after my father arrives, but this is what he told me. They never did find the couple. The police reviewed security cameras, too blurry to make out any physical details, and told my parents that the couple left the store immediately after my father showed up, without any groceries. Every time I see a man or woman in Walmart that looks as I remember them, I get anxiety and try to avoid them. I forgot to mention that the two seem to be in their mid-50s from what I remember. I believe they were a couple, but I don't know for sure. I don't think she was his mother, though. It seems a few people thought they were mother and son based on the way I explain it, so I apologize for that. So to the hillbilly couple lurking in Walmart. I hope to never ever meet you again. Attempted kidnap in Walmart. There are tons of stories on social media of women fearing for their lives in stores. I can't speak to the validity of their stories, but I can tell you mine. I was working a job that sometimes had late hours, and I would blow off steam in my local Walmart afterwards, either to pick up groceries or to just walk around to wind down before bed. When I pulled up to the parking lot, there were two men hanging out in the almost deserted parking lot. I sat in my car for a minute because they scared me. I almost didn't go in, that's how much of a bad vibe they were giving me. They were sitting on the hood, and it wasn't until two other people showed up that I decided I felt safe enough to walk in with the two new people. The other two men followed. I did my shopping as usual across the store, until I realized I was being followed. The two men waiting outside previously were suddenly in my eye line every time I looked up. They were across from me in makeup. They were down the aisle from me in house goods, down the aisle from me in grocery, so I decided I would test them to see if they were following me. I walked to my left and one of the men ended up looking at women's bathing suits while he was watching me. That was it. There was no denying now. As I made my way towards the front of the checkout, I saw one of the men sprint out the front door ahead of me. As I checked out my items, the second made his way out the door. That's when I decided this is really going to happen if I go out those doors. Those men are going to take me. I decided to get an escort. It took a long time for me to find someone working. It was already after 12 a.m. and most people were stalking. But when I finally did, I told them I didn't feel safe, that these men were following me, and that I wanted an escort. In that time, the second man came back into the store to see what was taking me so long. The manager said they had been hanging out in the parking lot all day. So the manager finally found a man to walk me out, and what I saw when we walked out will stay with me forever. The first man was crouched down, off to the right of the doors, as if he were going to jump someone from behind. When I saw his face, he knew that I knew what he was doing. He ran to his car, called his buddy, I'm assuming. He got on the phone real quick and went and sat in the car while I was escorted. I called the police as I drove away. I should have done it inside the store. A big regret that I have. So, attempted kidnappers, let's not meet. Walmart guy won't let me leave. A few days ago, I decided to go to Walmart to pick up a few things. That day, I was wearing a bright dress with sunflowers printed on it. I wore my hair down, which is also a brighter blonde color. As I was shopping, I went down the international aisle to grab Marin. As I walked down, I felt eyes on me. I stood in front of the shelf stocked with different sauces and condiments looking for Marin, when a guy came so close to me that I had to look at him. The moment we locked eyes, he smiled and said, "Hi, how are you?" I instantly felt uneasy, so I said nothing, smiled at him and walked away. There's no particular reason the man made me feel uneasy. He looked fine. He looked like he was in his early to mid-30s, maybe a few inches taller than me, around 5'8". and had brown hair. His dirty orange cutoff shirt and brown boots made me think he was in construction, but who knows? All I know is that he was weird in a way I can't put my finger on. After I walked away, I went to the complete opposite end of the store and kept looking around me. He was nowhere to be found for the next 20 minutes or so that I shopped. So I thought I was just overreacting. I started heading towards the checkout area, and once I got to the lines, I saw him standing right next to the refrigerators next to the checkout, staring at me. He had one item in his hand, so after we made eye contact, he walked towards the self-checkout area. I did a 180 and checked for the longest line I could find, thinking I could wait him out. It took about 20 minutes to get through checkout, and I dragged my feet walking out of the store, making sure the guy wasn't waiting for me in the store. With him nowhere to be seen, I picked up the pace once I got outside. I started to think I was being irrational. He wasn't unattractive, he gave off no signs of actually being dangerous. I must be crazy, right? Walking towards my car, I saw a brown worker's truck waiting close to the exit start to drive around the parking lot once I stepped out of the store. I didn't think much of this truck at the time, because I had thought the guy had left, and at that point, I just wanted to get to my car because it was raining. I finished packing my trunk when the same truck started to pull through the spot diagonal of mine, slowly inching into the spot right next to my car so that my driver's side was right next to the truck's driver's side. I heard the guy's voice say, "Excuse me," as he opened my car door. I quickly slid in, hoping I could just get away with him thinking I didn't hear him. I locked the door, turned the car on, and quickly turned it into reverse. I started pulling out, but before I could get far, the brown truck pulled forward and moved diagonally right behind my car, so that I couldn't back up without hitting his car entirely. I looked in front of me to realize with the car in front of me, there was no way I was going to just drive out of there with no issues. I turned my head and saw the guy sitting in his truck with his window rolled down. I decided to roll down my window and asked, "What's up?" in a hostile tone. He began, "I just saw you in the store, and you are absolutely so beautiful. I just had to tell you." "Oh, thank you," I said, praying he didn't get out of his vehicle. "I couldn't let myself walk away without asking for your number so that I can take you out," he told me. I picked up my hand with my wedding ring and told him, "I'm married." As he began to respond, I rolled up my window and stared at my steering wheel, waiting for him to move his truck. I couldn't stand to look in his direction because I felt his eyes on me. So after what seemed like the longest minute, I heard him finally move his truck. I peeled out of there in a heartbeat. The guy might have had great intentions, he might have been genuine, but I got a dark and heavy vibe that didn't sit right with me. So, guy at Walmart who blocked me into my spot to ask me out, let's not meet again. Strange man at Walmart. For some background on me, I'm a 5'3" female. I used to have my hair colored in bright colors. At the time of the story, it was bright blue. And at the time of these two incidents, I was in my very early 20s. I live in the central part of Texas, born and raised here. It was a little after I'd first gotten my driver's license when my mom had asked me to run to Walmart in order to pick up some groceries for dinner. I figured sure, why not? Plus I had just gotten paid. Maybe I could buy something for myself as well. Now usually when I go shopping anywhere, I always have my phone and headphones with me so I can listen to music while I shop. This day, however, I left my phone at home on its charger. Sucks, but whatever. I wasn't going to take long to get what I needed. As I'm walking through the store grabbing dinner, I start realizing something was off. I couldn't really understand why, but I started to feel like I was being followed. I looked around me as discreetly as I could, and didn't really notice anyone. A few families, some college kids, and then this one guy in a dirty wife beater. I shrugged it off and figured I was just being paranoid, so I continued on my way. But every so often I get that feeling of being watched. So I'd keep looking around and I never saw anything weird. Except on my journey into a third aisle, I noticed the guy in the dirty wife beater again. He was some older white guy, maybe mid to late 40s. He had short orange blonde hair, a bit of facial scruff, and some sort of facial tic. He looked a little off. He was just standing and staring. He didn't even have a shopping cart from what I remember. And he just stared at me. I turned back around and figured maybe I was blocking his path. I grabbed my cart and started wandering over to where the art supplies were since I needed a few new sketchbooks. And I could still feel him following me. The entire time. At that point, I started to get a little freaked out. I'd never had this happen before. So then I decided I'd try to lose him by going through different aisles. At first it worked, and I decided now would be my time to leave. So I head up to a cashier, pay for everything, and make my way out. Then I suddenly hear someone behind me call out, "Don't leave yet, baby." I looked back behind me because I knew that comment was directed at me. And lo and behold, the guy in the dirty wife beater. I just ignored him and booked it out of the store. As I make it to the car though, I keep hearing him behind me saying things like, "Come back, and I'm talking to you." Thankfully, I managed to get everything in the car and book it out of the parking lot before he got to me. I was shaking by the time I got home. I thought about telling my parents about what happened, but decided not to. I figured it was a one-off kind of thing. Boy, was I wrong. About a few months later, my mom, M, and one of my older sisters, C, went to the same Walmart to do some grocery shopping. I told no one about the incident from months prior, but I did gain a tendency to carry my pocket knife with me at all times afterwards, just for added safety. So we're walking in talking about something dumb, or about what we were supposed to get, I can't remember. When all of a sudden I looked ahead of us and just froze on my steps. Right in front of us was Mr. Dirty Wife Beater, still looking grungy as all hell, and looking straight at me. M and C had noticed my sudden lack of movement when this guy walks closer to us, never looking elsewhere besides my face, and starts rambling about my colored hair. "Why do you change your hair? Is it to get men to look at you? 'Cause I'm looking." Those are the words that are still ingrained into my brain. My mom looked at him confused. Same with my sister. I was still shocked and tense with just how uncomfortable I was, and how scared I felt. I didn't really know what to do. Thankfully, maybe due to my fear, I managed to start power walking ahead of my mom and sister while this guy kept talking. When I stopped in the baking aisle, M and C asked me what that was all about. I finally told them, and M started getting concerned, asking me if maybe I should get security involved. For some reason, maybe my anxiety, I decided not to get security involved. I did end up that entire trip looking over my shoulders constantly to make sure we didn't get followed out to the car. So yeah, crazy and or possibly doped up guy in a wife beater. Let's not meet. Gas station guy in the middle of nowhere offers to let a man help you, baby. I remember something that happened to my best friend and I a few years ago, and I figured I might share it here. While my best friend at the time and I were seniors in high school, 2016-ish, we went on a weekend trip to visit my grandmother a couple hours away from my town in Georgia, USA. The town we lived in was comparatively small for the state, but one of the biggest towns within a few hours. But we had to travel about 2.5 hours through tiny, somewhat redneck towns to get to my grandmother's place. We were on our way back home and we had to stop at a gas station literally in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking cornfields, cotton fields, streets with no signs or lights, not even stop signs, and definitely no cell service. The convenience store attached to the gas station had maybe a couple of snacks inside, but looked deserted from the outside. No other cars or people in sight. And we didn't bother to get anything other than gas. I paid with card, mainly because I didn't want to leave my 5'1", 100-pound friend alone in the car while I went alone inside. Another car pulled up on the other side of the single gas pump while I just started pumping gas. And because of everything I read on the subreddit, I already had a weird feeling and decided to stay alert and stand outside of the car with my driver's side door open, so my friend could see and hear everything going on. A thin, late 50s-ish older man got out of the car and seemed to be paying at the pump and standing beside his car while he got gas. But after a few seconds, he walked around the pump and maneuvered himself around my car door to stand within a foot of me, and asked if he could pump my gas for me. Luckily, the gas nozzle was locked, so it was pumping without me having to hold it, and I immediately placed myself between the opening of the door and the man, and prepared to either shut the door with me inside it or move and slam it behind me to protect my friend if necessary. I calmly told him it was fine, no thank you. He looked me up and down with the corner of his lip tilted up and said, "Pretty girls like you shouldn't be out here all alone. And you definitely shouldn't have to do this by yourself. Let a man help you, baby." And covered my hand with his own as he reached for the gas pump I was holding. I jerked my hand out from underneath his and slammed my car door shut, thinking the last thing I would want is him jumping in my car and driving away with my friend in the passenger seat. Orange flags started turning red, and my usual overly polite demeanor turned serious as I remembered something I'd read here that said it was better to be safe and to seem mean rather than be polite and uncomfortable. So I responded and said, "Sir, get away from me. I can pump my own gas and I've already said no thank you. Leave us alone." He didn't move, only raised his chin and managed to make eye contact with me, all lip tilt gone. I stared him down and figured I'd gotten enough gas to last us enough time to get the hell out of wherever we were. So I maintained eye contact, pulled the nozzle out, and basically threw back onto the pump before getting into my car and drove away before he had even moved. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that his car wasn't even being filled up with gas, telling me he was driving by and decided to help a damsel in distress out. My friend was shaking the whole way home, telling me she would have just let the man pump her gas. But I'm just glad some of the confidence I'd gained from this sub helped me stay so attentive and respond confidently enough to get out of the situation. So, creepy, helpful gas station man in the middle of Ghost Town, Georgia, let's not meet. Gas station encounter. I'm a long-time lurker, first-time poster. Thought I'd share this story since I've never posted anything. About 7 years ago when I was 17, my parents went out of town for a weekend and left me at home. This was a pretty common occurrence. My parents trusted me. I would usually spend these weekends away staying with friends and family, as my parents' house is a bit creepy to be in alone, even during the day. We live in a small rural town where everyone knows each other, and generally it's pretty quiet and safe. Saturday, I was supposed to stay with a friend, but her parents decided at the last minute not to let me stay. It wasn't a big deal that I had to leave. I was somewhat prepared to have to go to home because her parents got weird about company sometimes. I left her house, which is about 15 minutes from my parents' house, around 9:30 or 9:45. While I was on my way home, I got a weird feeling that I can't really explain. I just knew that I didn't want to go stay at my parents' alone. I called my brother and asked if I could stay with him. At the time, he was living with a woman who had a small child. He told me it'd be quieter and easier for him just to come stay with me, since his dog would bark if I tried to come in the house. He said he would come be at our parents' house in 20 minutes. Side note that's relevant later, my brother is a relatively scary-looking guy. He's about 6'3", 200 pounds, pretty muscular and covered in tattoos. After hanging up, I decided to stop at a gas station and grab a snack before going home, so that my brother would be there when I got there. I pulled into the gas station. There were only a few cars in the lot, which is typical because this is a small town in the rural south, where everything pretty much stops after 8 p.m. I parked and walked up to the door. There was a man standing outside the door smoking. He opened the door for me without saying anything. This is normal Southern hospitality, especially since I'm female. I smiled and thanked him. Inside, there was another man standing by the door. I noticed him staring at me as soon as I came in. He gave me that gross up and down look and said something to the effect of, "Hey, sexy, what are you doing alone?" Creepy as fuck. I just ignored him and walked towards the back of the store. He yelled after me and called me a bitch. I still ignored him. I figured he was drunk or high or just an asshole. Most people around here talk a big game but rarely back it up. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. I got my snacks and paid at the counter. When I walked back up to the door, both the men were gone. I was happy not to have to deal with anyone catcalling. I began walking across the lot towards my car, which was probably about 100 feet away from the door. As I was walking, I looked down at my phone to see if enough time had passed for my brother to be at my parents' house. When I looked up, the asshole who had hit on me was standing at the pump, staring. I looked at him for a second and continued walking. "Hey, you know you're supposed to answer a man when he speaks to you," he said. I remember saying something snarky back to him and getting in my car. He looked pissed at my sarcasm. I locked my doors as soon as I was in my car, started it, and was thinking of nothing but getting home to eat my snacks and hang out with my brother. I put my car in gear and realized the man had disappeared. I looked around before pulling out of my parking spot, only to realize that both men were sitting in a car facing mine across the lot. They were both staring at me and talking, occasionally even pointing toward me. I just stared at them, defiant and pissed. I didn't want them to think they scared me at all. While we were sitting having our staring contest, the man who had opened the door for me smiled and gave me the finger across the throat gesture, as in, "You're dead." I rolled my eyes and pulled out of the gas station, annoyed. To my dismay, they pulled out behind me. I hadn't been scared up until this point because, as I said, most people here are a lot of talk with no follow-through. Instead of going home, I took a few back roads that connect back in a sort of circle to see if they were really following me, which of course they were. When they realized I was testing them, they drove up really close to me and started laying on the horn. I couldn't see their headlights, they were so close. I called my brother and told him what was going on. He told me to come home and he would handle it. I started driving home. The two assholes were still on my ass, blowing the horn. Even with my detours, I was only about 3 to 4 minutes from my parents' house. I slowed down to pull in the driveway and was immediately relieved. At the end of the driveway, my brother was standing shirtless, with his shoulders back, hands crossed in front of his stomach, clearly holding a pistol. His intimidating-looking pit bull sitting by his side. I drove around him into the yard. The two guys actually started to pull in behind me until they saw my brother. Then they hightailed it out of there. I have no idea what they would have done if I'd stopped somewhere alone or kept driving. I always think fondly of that image of him standing there like a badass, ready to protect me. I'm thankful he was there. A stranger got in my car at an empty gas station and wouldn't get out. This happened just last night, and honestly, I'm just a little bit shaken over it still. I'll try to retell the tale exactly as it happened, but my fear is sure to have fudged my memory a bit. I work evenings as a dispatcher in a medium-sized Midwestern city. I was driving home at 2 a.m. when I stopped for gas. In retrospect, it was stupid to stop at all. The gas station was poorly lit and completely empty of any other customers. But I knew the shady areas of town, and this was not usually one of them. As I was pumping gas, I noticed a middle-aged black woman sitting on the curb across the parking lot. It was a cold night and had just started raining. The woman was not wearing weather-appropriate clothing, so she was drenched. When the woman saw that I was watching her, she called out to me from across the parking lot. My second of many stupid decisions that night was choosing to engage with her. I was worried for her, so I approached her to see what sort of help I could offer. "Hi, beautiful. I'm just trying to get home, but no one will help me, she said. I'm trying to get to City A, but the cab ride is $60 and I only have $40. Can you help me? I don't usually give money to panhandlers, but this woman seemed genuine. The weather was terrible and my job centers around helping people, so I agreed. I told her I didn't have any cash, but if she would come with me inside, I'd take some money out of the ATM and give her a few dollars. But the ATM wasn't working. I apologized and told her there was nothing else I could do for her. She followed me back outside, idly chatting with me as I opened my driver's door to get in. And then she got in my car. I was too shocked to really say anything. I sat staring at her as she buckled herself into the passenger seat. As soon as she got into my car, her demeanor changed entirely. She no longer seemed forlorn as much as she did extremely excited and restless. Just take me to my aunt's house. She can give me money. Of course, alarm bells are going off in my head. Although my first instinct is to tell her to get the fuck out of my car, my gut tells me that she would be dangerous. She'd already proven to be unpredictable. She seemed to be high, and I didn't know if she had any weapons on her. Forcing her out of my vehicle, I thought, had the potential to elicit a violent reaction. Where are you asking me to take you? I finally said. Just start driving, and I'll tell you where to turn. No, if you want me to consider driving you anywhere, I need you to tell me where we're going, I say, with no real intention of driving her anywhere. Don't worry, honey. I'm not one of the bad blacks. I'm not going to rob you or nothing, just drive. No, I repeated, where's your aunt's address? Okay, it's on Street A. What's the house number? As I was asking her questions, she got really agitated. We still had not left the gas station parking lot. I considered getting out of the car and going into the gas station for help, but A, she seemed to know and be friendly with one of the attendants that was inside when I tried to get money, and B, I wasn't about to leave her alone in my car. Finally, she snapped at me and said, "Why are you asking me so many questions? I thought we were friends. You don't trust me? Is it because I'm black?" I work at a police department, I said. It's my job to ask these sorts of questions. She flipped the fuck out. She started yelling at me about being a snitch, about trying to get her in trouble, just in general losing her damn mind. At this point, I'm more scared than ever. I just wanted her gone. But my instinct still told me asking her to get out of my car wouldn't work. So I decided to take a risk. I'm not a police officer, I just work at a police department. Why don't I take you to Walmart and see if they have an ATM that works? My idea was to get her out of my car as peacefully as possible, then lose her in the store. She liked my idea and immediately calmed down. I knew that driving off with this woman in my car was incredibly risky, but it seemed like my best option at the time. As we're driving, she keeps talking to me. Her thoughts were erratic, bouncing all over the place. It sometimes seemed difficult for her to follow through, one thought at a time. But this is roughly how our conversation went. I'm glad we're friends now. I have about 5 or 6 people trying to get me. I'm going to come to your work tomorrow so we can arrest them together. Okay, we can talk about that tomorrow. Tonight you said you were trying to get home? Yes, honey, I'm trying to get to City B. City B? I thought you said you need to go to City A. Yeah. City A, that's what I meant. That's why the cab ride is $40. It's far away. The cab ride is $40? Yeah, baby. You said you have $40. I do, baby, and I have $40, but the cab ride is $60. Silence. Are you sure you can't take me to my aunt's house? She lives close by on Street B. I thought you said you lived on Street A. No, baby, I mean Street B. But it don't matter because she won't give me money anyway. You sure you can't just take me to City A? It was terrifyingly obvious that this woman was utterly full of shit, because the details of her story were constantly changing. When we pulled into the Walmart parking lot, she finally got out of my car, only after I got out first, and followed me into the store. I told her before we went to find an ATM I needed to use the restroom. My plan was to call the police from inside a stall, but she followed me into the bathroom, and that's when things got really weird. She grabbed the crook of my arm and whispered into my ear, If you don't got no money to give me, that's okay. But let me ask you something, sweetie. Do you like getting your pussy ate? I told her no as forcefully as I could manage, bolted into a stall and locked the door as fast as I could possibly manage. As soon as I had a barrier between us, I said, "You know, I have some friends at the police department that can probably help you better than I can. I'm just going to call them and we can figure this out together." Again, at the mention of the cops, she started screaming at me. I just kept reiterating that the police would help her. She snapped at me that she was just going to leave and stormed out of the bathroom. But it wasn't over. I waited to make sure she was really gone. Sure enough, not 60 seconds after she left, she came back into the bathroom and started banging on the stall door. And she said something that scared me more than anything else. "Hey, come back to your car with me. I left my beer in your car." I blatantly tell her that no, I saw her get into my car and she had absolutely nothing with her other than the clothes on her back. After that, she left the bathroom again and didn't come back. I waited a good 5 minutes before exiting the bathroom. I immediately found a manager who called the police for me. Thankfully, I was in a different police jurisdiction from the one I work in, because I was mortified at how entirely stupid I'd been the whole night and would have died of embarrassment if any of my coworkers had responded. The officer that responded took my statement and advised me to be more careful in the future. He said that sometimes panhandlers turn violent, and that just recently there had been a report of a woman who matched my description assaulting a Good Samaritan that had stopped to try to help her. I definitely learned a lesson on stranger danger, and I'm lucky to have come out unscathed. I'm glad my stupidity didn't kill me. So Reddit, the next time you try to help a stranger at night, don't. Neither of us know how this happened. So, 12 years ago, we moved to where we are now. While packing, I put all important papers at the time in a locking file cabinet. This filing cabinet ended up in our shed where it has sat for the past 12 years, untouched. It's actually in the back, underneath years worth of other things that have been put in storage as well. My oldest son's social security card was among these important papers, and he knew he would get it at 18 years old. Up until then, I've had his social security number memorized since it was issued to him. 2 years ago, he turned 18 and off to college he went. Before he left, we had a conversation that I would have to spend an entire day getting to that filing cabinet to retrieve his card for him. No problem, he memorized his social security number too. Life happened and I never got around to cleaning out the shed and getting the card. Right before lockdown, I managed to convince him to come home. He's been here ever since. Not long ago, we were chatting and he was cleaning out his wallet. Lo and behold, he pulls out his social security card. I said to him, "Oh, did you get tired of waiting and go online and get a new one?" He looked at me really confused and said, "No, I've had this for a long time now." I said, "No, don't you remember that I was supposed to get it from the shed?" He said yes, and I asked him when I gave it to him. He couldn't remember the actual act of me giving him his card. Neither of us remember this. I know for a fact that I never dug it out from that filing cabinet, and he knows for a fact that he never got a new one. We are both completely perplexed. I know this isn't extremely exciting, but it's bothering me so much. Stuff has been unexplainably appearing in my bedroom. There's these most recent examples of stuff that has just been randomly appearing in my bedroom. The first is a drawing on a photo I have taped to my wall. It is taped on all 4 corners. It's just a pretty normal-sized printed picture. And like last week, I noticed there was orange highlighter on each piece of tape, which definitely sounds like something I would do, but I just didn't, and obviously no one else did that. Next example, which happened just today, is actually crazy. I wanted to post about it, so that's why I downloaded Reddit right now. About 4 years ago, I had this white t-shirt I got at some fair. It was too big, so I cut strips on the end of the shirts to tie it, because that was a cute style 4 years ago. Anyway, I had a bunch of little white scraps of that shirt, They were rolled up and I managed to kind of get them everywhere before I threw them out. After that, I was finding them around for a few months. But now, 4 years later, there's none left. I vacuumed them all. But just now, I found one on top of the light of my ceiling fan. Not on a blade of the fan, but just on top of the lamp. But no way that piece of fabric has been there for 4 years. I've looked at the fan forever. I would have seen it before. This piece of fabric is very obvious to see from anywhere in the room. Looking at it now, it has no dust on it at all. Unlike the surface, it's on the lamp. Also, I recently changed the light bulb in that lamp, and I hadn't seen the fabric when I was up there. These two circumstances are weird because they are things that would make sense but just don't. Like drawing on the tape. I've done stuff like that before, but I didn't do it there. And I haven't even done it since I taped the photo to the wall. And then the fabric. I was finding those things around everywhere 4 years ago. I think I'm kind of understanding what the glitch is, but not really. Because it just doesn't actually make any sense. An old man on the side of the road. This glitch happened to me quite a while ago, I think almost about a year ago. I was driving to my friend's house at around sunset, and on the side of the road I saw an older man with quite a hunch in his back. He had a bucket hat and one of those light strip vests on the side. You know, the ones that let people see you while biking, etc. He was moving extremely slow. I can't remember, but I think he was carrying a cane as well. Well, I see him, take note of him, and then turn the corner to go down the street to where my friend lives. I'm going like 25 miles per hour at this point. Suddenly, as I make it towards my friend's house, I see the exact old man, slowly turning the corner of the street next to my friend's and then gone. Literally just not there. I instantly went cold as hell and almost started shaking, because I was so sure I had seen something paranormal. There was literally no way this old man made it all the way down to the end of this long street without literally running like hell. He would have to have been going 2 times faster than my car to make it to the point where he was turning around the corner. And then when I drove by the street, he turned down. He just wasn't there. Freaked me out so bad. Anyways, I got to my friend's house and almost cried. It is kind of known that his little corner of the street where his house sits is haunted by a little boy. So maybe this area in general is just haunted? I really don't know, but all I know is when you see something paranormal/glitchy, your body just reacts in a way that's completely new. I've never felt so cold, all the way up to my bones. My partner's engagement ring. My partner and I are long distance. We recently got engaged and I shipped them the engagement ring. We're simple people and so it's just a black snake ring. I know, nothing fancy. But I don't think the shape of the ring has to do with this, unless it does. An important note is that they have DID. If you don't know what it is, please look it up. One altar hates the ring. This altar is not my partner. They are just an altar in my partner's DID system. And when they were on a walk, this altar threw it off a bridge and down into some train tracks, I think. The setting wasn't super specific, but I know that if my partner were to jump off the bridge to go to retrieve the ring, they wouldn't physically be able to get back to the bridge. So getting this ring after it was thrown was physically impossible. My partner finally fronts and they freak out about the ring. They don't know where it is and they're having a panic attack about it. The room is torn apart top to bottom, put back together again, and they're still in hysterics about not knowing where it went. The altar that threw it off the bridge fronted again and told me over text what had happened. Since it was over text, the next time my partner fronted, they were able to reread the conversation and then proceed to cry because it's unretrievable. The ring was gone for about a week, and I have been talking nearly constantly with my partner and their altars, so I know where they leave to, when they do, and I know when they sleep. We're FaceTiming each other almost every second of the day due to long distance, so it's safe to say that they haven't been near the bridge whatsoever. And even if they were, again, they can't get to the ring. We're on call and they suddenly tell me the ring is right in their dresser. It's the exact same black snake engagement ring, just sitting there, and at this point, we have no idea what to do except just accept it. While the ring was gone for around a week, they were under a lot of stress. Now that the ring is found, the stress has lessened. But it was just sitting there on the dresser, right in plain sight. I've even seen their dresser and it was most obviously not there. So where? Possibly citing an agent. In April 2017, my friends, male 34, male 27, and I, female 36, were walking to a bus stop and we were running late, so walking pretty fast uphill. We noticed a guy around 10 years older than us dressed in teen fashion sportswear. He was the male equivalent of mutton dressed as lamb, so we all noticed him, as his cap and trainers were pretty flashy. He passed us on the left going down the hill, which is pretty steep, and we got to the top of the hill and see the exact same guy walking towards us. We all stop dead in our tracks and stare. I wonder if the guy has a twin. If he does, why would they both dress so expensively cringe, and why didn't any three of us recognize the guy anyway? We live in a council estate where literally everyone knows everyone. It's like a small town. My mind is racing and I turn to look down the hill to see if the guy we passed is there. But he's not, which is even more worrying, as there's nowhere he really could have gone. Even if he ran down the hill, he should have only just got to the bottom, which is a crossing on a main busy road. There's absolutely no way he could have doubled back on us either, as we were practically running uphill to catch the bus, and we're nearly at the ascent as he passed us going down the hill. The guy then crosses the road and starts walking down the hill again on the top left, just as he did about 30 seconds before. We just look at each other and sprint to the bus stop. We don't have to talk because all three of us know this is seriously weird and just want to get away. The bus arrives just as we get to the stop and we go down the hill passing the guy that just passed us. And as we get to the crossing, I look for the first guy we saw, but he's not there, even though he should be, and we all see how weird it is. All three of us clearly remember it to this day and have put it down to a glitch in the Matrix, as there's nothing else it could have been. Disappearing into thin air. So it was basically around 5 in the morning and I was in my room. I woke up super early that day, but I was well rested and had been up for a couple of hours. I have this vape basically, and it's a pretty decent size, a very bold orange color. Hard to miss. Keep in mind, I hadn't left my room at any point since I'd woken up. I'm hitting the vape on my bed while watching a movie and I throw it down beside me on the bed. Couple minutes later, I go to hit it again and it's not there. At first, I didn't think anything of it and just figured it had gotten lost in my bed and started looking for it. But after some time, I had come to the realization that it had completely disappeared. I searched every corner of my room, in every possible place, and it was nowhere to be found. Even took off and shook down my blankets and sheets and pillowcases, and nowhere. Just gone. And I know what you're thinking. There's got to be some plausible explanation for this or whatever, but let me just clarify this. 1, I hadn't left my bedroom once. 2, it's a heavy object, so if it fell, I definitely would have heard it. 3, regardless of whether it may have fallen, I looked everywhere. Everywhere. 4, I had just hit it, so there's no way it could have ended up anywhere else in my room to begin with. 5, I don't drink or smoke weed, so no, I wasn't intoxicated and simply forgotten where I put it. This is not the first time this has happened. In fact, it's happened multiple times. The exact situation, and to this day, I've never found any single thing I've lost. Every time it happened in my room, and they've been vapes. Don't know if that's a coincidence. I have renovated my room multiple times, and after each circumstance, they never even show up then. It's so bizarre. I'm not a person that's prone to losing things, and I have a very organized room, given I always like my things in a certain place. If this was the first time this has happened, I simply would rationalize it as a misplaced object, but this has happened a dozen times and every situation has been identical to each other. Always taken place in my room, and every single time, it's always been my vape. Removed from space. I was 14 or 15, 19 now, when my parents moved into their current house in a moderately rural suburb. There were houses to the left, right, and across from us, but behind us there was a fence separating us from a completely different suburb. Well, one day I was walking around the neighborhood and discovered that, at the far end of the road I lived on, the picket fence ended and gave away into the barbed wire fence and then dense woods where development was going on to the north. There was a hole in the barbed wire that was big enough for me to fit through. I wasn't much of a rule breaker, so I would usually be opposed to crawling under a barbed wire fence. But something caught my attention. On the other side of that opening, there was a pathway mowed into otherwise waist-high weeds. Figuring it was part of my neighborhood and therefore my prerogative to explore, I went through. There was nothing super weird except this overwhelming feeling of loneliness. It sounds really cliche and I can probably chalk it up to nerves. But I felt like I was separated from the rest of the world, or at least much farther from my house than I was a second before. There were, sure enough, paths mowed into very tall grass, and very recently mowed, because it was neatly done. The paths didn't lead anywhere. They seemed to zigzag across this field in wide arcs and open up in small sections where I could see the tree line. It was probably 10 acres across, a very large field. I followed the path going left from the barbed wire fence entrance, which would have taken me to my house and the neighboring suburb behind my back fence. But the field continued to stretch on. I could see houses on the other side of the tree line, but I couldn't recognize any of them as my own. To top it off, I was certain that the place I was standing must have been part of that other suburb, which I could normally see from my backyard. I went back home and asked my parents, who said they hadn't seen a field like that when looking around the neighborhood. I went on Google Earth and it showed a very small patch of undeveloped woodland where that field was. I even went so far as to check my country's registry to see who owned that land, but it said that someone from across the US owned it. I went back several times between ages 14 and 17. I could never convince my parents to come with me. I would bring a camping chair and my textbooks and do my homework out there in high school. One day I went and there were empty plastic soda bottles in one of the wide open spaces, which was reassuring because it means someone other than me was there. I was reminded of the story because I came back from my first year of college to find the land north of my neighborhood being developed into another suburb. I looked as I went by the fence. This time, it appeared that the section of barbed wire had been repaired, and it looked just like undeveloped woodland beyond, the same as it was on Google Earth. My biggest issue with this situation is how large the space was. I'm a pretty avid backpacker and have experience orienting myself outdoors, so it was really unnerving when I was standing in a field where I knew another suburban home should be standing. My other issue is with the paths cut into it. In my walks around them, I never saw a path that cut into a person's yard or property, nor was there a gate for a mower to enter. It was fenced on all sides. It wasn't a pattern or anything crazy like a crop circle. It was just a nonsensical looping path through an otherwise overgrown field. Can you guys offer any logical explanations other than you were disoriented? Both neighbors walking same dog in two places at once. This legit made me feel crazy. Okay, so the back of my house backs up to a main road, and we don't have a lot of fences in our neighborhood, so you can clearly see the back of me plus my neighbor's house when you're driving past. So one morning, within the last few weeks or so, I was pulling out of my driveway at the front of my house, and I very distinctly saw my male neighbor leaving the front of his house with a dog, on leash and tow. He seemed to be heading in the same direction I was going. I remember because there are lots of kids around this hood and I'm always hyper-vigilant to make sure no one's running around. After I left the cul-de-sac, I made a left turn onto the main road, which took me directly past the back of our houses. I turned to gape in confusion and I saw the female neighbor walking the same exact dog, but around the back of the houses instead. I even slowed down to do a double take. I started thinking about these glitch stories and thought I would share. Any thoughts on this glitch? Now, don't you dare give me that, oh, maybe they have two dogs and they were both walking them separately, or maybe it was someone else with the same kind of dog. Blah, 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 nonsense. We know our neighbors here, and it was definitely them, plus that dog is distinct as hell. Big, giant, fluffy white dog and 3 legs. There is not more than one of those around. Also, they didn't have time to hand off the dog to one another and switch directions. They were both on foot and my car got to the road quickly. Besides, who in the heck would do that unless they were deliberately trying to make me insane? Note to self: I have a new plan to make other people feel insane. When you're getting followed by somebody at 3 a.m., you hope it's a cop. This happened a few years ago when I was bartending in college. I was coming home down a stretch of divided highway at around 3 a.m. when I noticed a car heading towards me in the wrong lane. I doubted myself at first and thought the car was on the other side of the highway. Sure enough, a white Ford sedan passed me at a really high speed, at least 90. It's worth noting for later that I also drive a white Ford sedan. I was used to drunk, idiot drivers in the middle of the night, so I pulled to the side of the road and let him pass me. I had a moment of clarity and thought to call the police, thinking this person could hurt themselves or somebody else. The dispatcher answered, and after telling them which road exit mile marker I was at, told me they would send a car. The state police station was only a few exits away, so I figured they would send somebody and I would just drive home. As I headed back onto the highway, I noticed some lights a few miles behind me. I live in a more rural part of southeastern PA, and traffic at 3 a.m. tends to be truckers and cops. The car gained on me as I was getting up to speed, so I stayed in the right lane and waited to be passed. Instead, they flipped on their high beams, making it uncomfortable to drive, and rode my tailgate. At this point, I was going to be pulled over by the police. I drove a white Ford sedan and had just called about a different white Ford sedan, so I grabbed my registration from the glove box. Suddenly, the car behind me audibly slammed on the brakes and stopped in the middle of the highway. They must have shut off their car because the lights went out and I saw what looked like the same Ford sedan from earlier. Still, I thought this may have been a police car. They had a roof rack, and it could have looked like I had reached for a gun in my glove box or something. I panicked and called 911 for the second time and asked the dispatcher if they had sent a cruiser to investigate. The dispatcher was a little curt with me and assured me they had sent somebody out. Dispatcher, we have sent a troop out to find the car, sir. Me. I only ask because somebody is following me and acting weird. It could be a cop and I think I freaked them out by getting my registration. Dispatcher, are you pulled over? Me. No, they didn't turn on their lights. Dispatcher, let me try to get the trooper we sent out. As she was talking, the car again sped towards me and stopped inches from my bumper. Again, their high beams were on, and again they slammed their brakes. I told the dispatcher, I'm pretty sure this is not the police behind me. The car sped to my bumper again and turned their high beams on, this time laying on the horn. Hearing this, the dispatcher asked me what was happening. Dispatcher, what's happening? Did you honk? Me. That's the car behind me. I don't think it's a cop. Dispatcher, I'll try to get the trooper again, but I don't think that's him behind you. For some reason, this is what shook me. Before that, I was thinking I would get pulled over and maybe get a ticket. Up until then, I was going to the speed limit and trying to avoid getting pulled over. I told the dispatcher, "I don't care if I get pulled over, I'm speeding, and if they put their lights on, then I'll pull over." I started to accelerate and the person behind me just kept up with me. The speed limit was 55 and they kept on my bumper the entire time, but this time they were swerving. I tried to signal for an exit and bail on it, but they followed. At the next exit, I took the off-ramp and continued on to the on-ramp, and the car behind me followed the whole time. I thought about trying to go to a Wawa convenience store / gas station that's pretty much the only populated place in southeastern PA at 3 a.m. But the dispatcher and I thought that would be unsafe. She was calm and talking to another person trying to send police to me. The other person, maybe a supervisor, asked if I could drive to the state police station, realizing that I was one exit away. I told her I was coming there and she said she would have troopers meet me outside. As I pulled off to the exit, the car followed me. I blew a few red lights trying to get to the police station and the car tried to pull into the other lane to pass me or pull up alongside me. Once the police station was in view, I put on my turn signal and the car slammed on its brakes again, turned off their lights and turned into the parking lot. The story ends kind of anticlimactically as I pulled into the police station and met the troopers. 2 of them went to find the car and I stayed with a 3rd trooper. I thanked the dispatcher and her supervisor, and the state trooper escorted me home after taking a statement from me. I was never called to follow up or testify, so I can only assume the person didn't get caught. Meth hitchhiking. I was on a hitchhiking adventure from BC, Canada to Antigua, Guatemala, which started in September 2019. This post is taken from the notes in my journal, which I wrote as soon as I could after this insane experience. If you've ever hitchhiked before, you know how amazing it is and how many cool people you can meet. Out of thousands of rides across 40 countries, I've only had 2 bad and or dangerous encounters thumbing it. This was my second one. I was taking a break from traveling to find weed trim work in California's Nevada City, a beautiful little town with a very interesting crowd, but got stuck a few towns over for not getting a ride all day. I ended up sleeping a night at the Love gas station, which I had done plenty of times before. I've slept on worse places, at least Love's has a bathroom. In the morning, I was a little more desperate to accept a ride because no one was stopping, and it had already been a whole day. I just wanted to get out of there. A pickup truck is speeding past me and slams the brakes ahead, then slowly backs up. Inside is a man and a woman in their late 50s, and he says in a husky voice, "Where are you headed, boy?" "Nevada City. Any distance helps." "Well, get in. We're going to Yuba." They seem normal enough, even without most of their teeth and hair, so I jumped in. It all happened in rapid succession. I toss my bag in the back and jump in. I shut the door. I notice a pile of guns and bullets on the floor. Before I have time to rethink my decision, we speed off. So as I'm trying to assess whether or not I'm in danger, they start telling me how this guy just got out of jail for aggravated assault. How he beat that motherfucker so bad, he can't think straight no more. And they both laugh. She's holding his seatbelt over his chest. They both smell like shit, and they start asking how much money I have. I think, yeah, I'm not safe here. After hitchhiking all this way, I don't look particularly wealthy. I'm filthy, I need a shower, I look no different than the stereotypical homeless guy. So I try to seem more poor than I am, and more tough than I am too. I'm broke as fuck, man. That's why I'm going to the city. I'm hoping to make some cash trimming. The man looks me in the eye. "Well, you'll find it all right. You'll find it good. Don't be afraid to do no dirty work. If people try, and they'll try, to fuck you, you fuck them first. You get what I'm saying? Put your eyes on the damn road, Jesus Christ." The woman points forward and he swerves back to the right lane. He asks me if I smoke, and knowing that California has legalized weed, I put 2 and 2 together. He's offering me a joint, so I say, yeah, I smoke. With a wild look in his eyes, he exclaims, "Great!" And we turn off the highway and start down a dirt road. I'm more than worried, and I look behind us. In the back of the truck is my bag, a chainsaw, pickaxe, and a plastic tarp over something. Didn't help my anxiety. Finally, we stop in front of a clearing. The woman takes out not a joint, but a meth pipe. It's the first time I've seen a meth pipe, and a lot of things start to make sense. While he lights up and exhales into the car, I've never seen smoke so white. I roll the window down as fast as possible because I don't want to smoke that shit. The woman takes some as well, and they tell me how they were going to collect money that a woman owes them. That damn bitch is gonna pay today one way or another. Damn straight. She better have the money. I'm gonna grab her and say, "Where's my money, bitch?" Oh, she'll have it all right. She'll have it or else. Say, son, you ever steal something? 'Cause we could make $20,000 today. I don't exactly know how to answer this guy, and he repeats $20,000 today. Here, smoke some of this, and hands me the pipe. Nothing like meth, ain't that right? I gently reject it and say that meth's not really my thing, which he surprisingly takes well and smokes some more before putting it away and driving off back towards the highway. His driving is terrible, swerving, speeding, hitting brakes abruptly, and starts trying to convince me to help them steal marijuana plants. You'll hold my gun, and I'll drill the hole, and I'll keep a lookout. Yeah, baby girl, we'll keep a lookout. Now, you gotta be careful if you hear the dogs, because them sons of bitches are nasty. Nasty. See this bite? And he reveals what looks like a terrible scar on his arm. I didn't really know how to get out of the situation, so I sounded as confident as possible and said that I was meeting a friend to look for work together and they would be expecting me today. We neared the end of the Yuba City where they pull over to the side. Well, it's your funeral. You don't want to eat? Fine by me, but if you ever want that cash, you call me. Hands me his number. Hell no, I think. Thanks, I will. Quickly retrieving my bag, smiling nervously. The woman says with a wave, "Take care now. God bless." And they speed off. I'm standing on the side of the road thinking, what the hell was that? Happy to be out of that car. Meth heads 1 and 2, thanks for the offer to steal marijuana plants, but let's never ever meet again. Chased through Satansville by a possible cult member. In Pennsylvania, right near the border into Delaware, there is a narrow, eerie place with deformed trees, closed-off paths, and lots of legends. It is formerly known as Devil's Road. The main attraction in a place called Satansville, which encompasses the whole of dark twists, isolated roads, and unsettling encounters. It was written about in the book Weird Pennsylvania, which highlights the creepy places of the state. According to many rumors, there is a cult house hidden in the woods surrounding the road, and any trespassers on the road, especially those who stop, will be chased out with a black or white SUV or truck. For years, I had read about the place and heard spine-chilling stories, until I couldn't stop thinking about seeing it for myself. My friend Matt and I almost spent every Friday night at the mall together, as teenagers do. As expected, it can get pretty boring pretty fast, especially with no money to actually have a motive to shop around for anything other than disappointment. Visiting Satansville without telling our parents became another weekly tradition of sorts. After he told me about his experience a month before our first visit, he told me that when he visited with his guy friends, his phone service completely cut out, leaving them without Google Maps in a potentially dangerous, unclear area that was already scarcely mapped. Soon after, he told me, a black truck came off a dirt road and followed closely behind them until they found the main road. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to be hooked. Not too much happened on our first few trips, We would see other cars rarely, as it's a hidden road that is no longer marked due to the excessive theft of a street sign. Occasionally, the cars would be black in color and we would get a rush of adrenaline. It was fun, but not exactly terrifying. Until one night. We finished up at the mall around 6, and we had left with enough time to circle around once or twice with daylight, and the remainder of the time in the dark. It was about a 40-minute drive to Satonsville from the mall, and I was tingling with excitement. According to the legends, cars that visit frequently are more likely to have experiences at this place, and this would be our third time visiting in the last few weeks. Instead of Matt and I going alone this time, we bought our friend, Lola, who was very outgoing and would likely have a sense of humor in a situation we'd be too scared to continue in normally. We drove down the highway and finally made the first turn leading to the seclusion. Matt and I had pinpointed several areas where we thought the cult house may be, but stopping on the road is illegal, so we'd never had a real chance to explore. At least, that's the logical reason I gave in lieu of us being major cowards. The ambience immediately changed as we entered Satonsville, and the cool night air fled in through the cracked windows. In the first few turns, other people aren't entirely a rare sight. A few trucks pulling out of driveways, the like. However, the turn onto Devil's Road never loses its wow factor. The trees on both sides of the narrow road lean away from the forest aggressively. Not just a tilt, but completely bending in the trunk away from things we could only imagine. We were approaching the first major road bend in the road, and a car was coming up towards us. It was a tight squeeze, nearly impossible for two opposing vehicles to pass. The presence of a car alone was enough to cause a twinge in my gut. Matt was focused on squeezing by while turning, and Lola was too busy cracking jokes to see what I saw. But I have never forgotten the face since then. I looked over to the white Jeep to my left, and the window was incredibly tinted but half down. Looking back at me straight into my eyes, like he'd been looking at me long before I looked to him, was a young man. Maybe about 25, with long blonde hair, a deathly pale face, and horribly thin fingers on the steering wheel. He was not at all focused on driving, as his eyes pierced me, and this is the worst part. His neck was turned completely towards me, while the rest of his body was completely straight forward. This may not sound creepy, but this was not the normal way to bend your neck. He said something, but I couldn't hear him over Lola and Matt laughing at our antics. I couldn't break his gaze. I was stuck staring at him until finally, Matt passed the bend and he was gone. I kept checking the rearview windows, terrified with a feeling I never quite felt before. When I could no longer see the Jeep, though it felt as though it could still see me, I quietly asked my friends if they'd seen him. Neither of them had looked at him, nor felt anything unusual. I was pretty unsettled, yet excited to see what would happen. We turned off Devil's Road, but we're still in Satonsville, preparing to loop back around when we passed a little shack that always housed two black trucks. There was no signs of any other drivers, and we wanted to stir the pot a little bit. We stopped for a few moments and honked the horn, flashed our blinkers, then kept driving. We also blasted Old Town Road for some reason, because that was our peak of comedy at the time. We looped back around and were back on the Devil's Road when Matt stopped mid-sentence to adjust his mirror. In the darkening distance was a black truck. We giggled with nervous excitement and kept driving. It was exciting, but it kept a reasonable distance, and I think we all kinda assumed it was a coincidence. That is, until we turned off Devil's Road once more and saw that there were no trucks parked by the shack anymore. We lost the truck when we turned on the main road to circle back again. We circled around 2 more times, nervous but skeptical, and not much happened other than an ass-riding white SUV that kept blinking its headlights. Not gonna lie, that freaked us out. And the return of one truck to the shack. This is where it gets really intense. On our 5th loop, we were all very tense. The aura had changed to heavy, and it was completely dark at this point. Things started to feel more ominous. probably from the slightly less passive actions taken towards us by whoever was there. We went down the bends, peering nervously into the woods. Some trees were marked with 666s and upside-down crosses, marks of other, more ballsy teenagers, and there was a distant light in the woods, courtesy of God knows what. As we turned off Devil's Road, but still in the heart of Satansville, headlights appeared behind us. It was impossible to tell what kind of car it was, as it was pitch black and we just started turning into the first major bend. Moments later, the truck appeared behind us, speeding. We were going about 25 and the truck must have floored it to catch up, and it drove uncomfortably close to us. I was the one to see it first. It was a black truck, windows tinted and driver unknown. We drove on for a minute, freaking out and turning completely behind us like creepy Jeep guy, but more normal. Soon a second truck joined behind it at a fork in the road, and they revved their engines as if in communication. The truck sped up, nearly crashing into us, and we were forced to speed up. This continued through many intense twists and turns, where our speed reached up to 70 at the maximum. They flashed their lights, kept speeding up and getting closer. At this point, we were losing our shit. They were definitely either going to run us off the road or catch us and do God knows what. They had these weird red lights on the top of their trucks, and the light was reflecting off every window in our tiny Honda. Just above a small hill, the main road was visible, and relief flooded us. We panicked again though when we realized we would have to wait for traffic to slow before we could turn, and they would definitely catch us. With nothing else to do, we stopped and glanced behind us. The trucks were gone. We all expected a sudden ambush, but made the turn onto the highway and started home, talking about what the fuck had just happened. We came to the conclusion that the trucks had probably turned onto a dirt road only visible to those who know it's there, and that they were chasing us away from their activities like the rumors say. What were they doing exactly? We have no idea, and we had no intention of finding out, as we hadn't been back since. I still can't get the face and presence of the man in the Jeep out of my head, and this was over a year ago now. So, creepy Jeep guy and potential cult leaders, let's not meet. Ever. Trust your instincts. About 1 to 2 years ago, I was dating a musician in the area. Apparently we had mutual friends and he gave lessons at a guitar center in the city where I took lessons. I had seen him there, but I didn't know we had connections at the time. It took me a while, but I realized we knew all the same people. He was about 10 years older than me. I will try to summarize this as best as I can. Once, I went to see a friend's band play at a local bar. I walked in and he was by himself drinking at the bar. I remember walking in the place and him snapping his head around and looking at me. That moment truly captured his deepest state of mind. A restless, down on his luck, searching for the answer kind of energy. I don't know how else to describe it, but I could tell right away in that brief moment this guy was off. I did not want to interact with him really. I was just there to relax and feel the music and hang out with the band after. But I had recently learned this guy knew the band and used to play with them, so I felt obligated to interact with him. We chatted and drank for a beer or two. By the end of the night, he suggests we hang out again and see more music sometime. I continued to hang out with this guy, always meeting up to go out to a bar after work. He seemed cool, confident, and he had recently moved to America in the last few years. So it was captivating to interact with someone who had cultural differences. After a few weeks of hanging out consistently, he revealed that he had gotten out of a relationship with a girl who he thought he would marry, but that she had BPD and drug issues. He later revealed that after they broke it off, she crazily accused him of domestic violence. Apparently she asked him to come over to her apartment and talk. They argued. He claims he didn't touch her and left. She called the police and 2 weeks later filed a report, and they went to court over it. He told me they didn't have enough evidence to charge him, but he took a deal where he would go to an assigned anger management class and do some community service, and then they would exonerate him from any charges. Unfortunately, I took his word that she was crazy and he was innocent, and decided that I would be the judge of his behavior around me from the present moment on. We enjoyed the same hobbies, including music and riding motorcycles. We started to go to bike nights and got to know a lot of the same people in the motorcycle circuit around the city. Our mutual friends seemed to like me being social, but when it came to me dating this guy, they either had a negative opinion of it or didn't express opinion at all. That guy doesn't have his shit together, they would say. Red flag number 2. I decided no one really has their shit together, and they probably didn't know this guy that well anyway. We dated for a little over a year. I ended up moving in with him about 8 months into it. I feel worse and worse about myself as time goes on. He's controlling. He takes every moment he can to make extremely rude / sarcastic remarks, always commenting on everything. I figure he's just insecure and will soon figure out soon enough that I'm no threat. He berates me for wanting any time on my own or for wanting to do anything that is meaningful to me. He expresses his admiration at my success in life, but also shoots me down for just about every little thing I do or say. We argue more. I try to retaliate and hold my own. I try to prove myself to him and explain myself constantly, but it feels like it's no use. Nothing is ever good enough. I try to express this in words to him so I can see where I'm misunderstood, so we can try to find resolution. But he just accuses me of being at fault. I know we are not compatible, but I can't quite figure out why. I just keep existing there. He continues to gaslight, belittle, and control me emotionally and sexually. I continue to convince myself that this is what relationships are like. I felt so awful about myself and my life. I go to therapy and quit my job. I end up getting offered a great new position at a new company, and I momentarily feel like things may turn out okay. At some point, I used his computer to print out a form I needed to send to the new company, and I see he left his files open. I saw file names that were related to his past court case. I get one of those weird feelings, and my instinct told me that this guy is a bullshitter and a liar, and I decided to look through the files for my own safety. I quickly find that he lied to me, blatantly and by omission, about the whole situation with his ex. She was living with him and left to go get her own apartment. He was the one reaching out to her. They sent letters back and forth, him insisting she was the only one for him, and he couldn't live without her. He would never stop loving her, etc. He went to her apartment late one night to try and work things out again, but she must have denied him, and he punched her in the face, threw her to the ground, and kicked her repeatedly. She had called the police immediately afterwards, not 2 weeks later like he said, and they documented the bruising and marks on her face and body consistent with what she reported. The police showed up at his house, and he refused to talk to them. I saw the copies of the police report and the court documents. I realized that he had done this after we had met during our first few weeks of hanging out and talking, not months ago, like he said when he initially brought this up. He had saved the letters. He still had pictures of her in her underwear on his computer. The whole thing made me feel so sick. Enough was enough. I was scared, and this dude could get very angry and belligerent, so I knew I had to be careful in how I handled this. I had an open conversation with him about my concerns with our relationship, but in a way that he felt in control. I asked him blatant questions about his ex situation and simply asked for the truth. He continued to feed me a timeline and details that were not consistent with the evidence I had found. I decided I had to get out quickly. I set up a new living situation, but it would take 2 weeks to get into. I planned to just ghost out of there one day with my small amount of stuff when he was gone, but he must have sensed my apprehension around him. One night he blatantly asked me if he and his life were too much for me to handle, and I just answered honestly and said yes, it's too much, but did not go into detail. So from that point on, the relationship was over. We discussed it being over. He said he would allow me to stay in the house for those 2 weeks until my house was ready. I owned a rental property at the time that I was moving back into. He insisted he still loved/cared for me and wouldn't do anything to hurt me. It was the worst 2 weeks of my life. He slept in a separate bedroom. I tried to stay out of the house. He became more upset as time went on, and I became more uneasy. He began to stalk me and then reveal that he saw me at certain places with certain people later on and demand answers. I would often come back to the house only to find him sitting up later with the light on, ready to interrogate me. It was absolute hell. I was finally able to move out after 2 weeks of this. We parted ways and he insisted we could remain friendly and he wouldn't do anything to hurt me. That's when he started to fly off the handle. This guy knew my spots I liked to hang out in. He knew where my house was because he was the real estate agent who facilitated the transaction when I bought it. He knew all of my mutual friends and manipulated them in ways to find out where I was, how I felt about him, and who I was hanging out with. I begged them to disengage with him, but they didn't seem to think he was dangerous. Everywhere I went, he was there. He would approach me constantly, berating me, accusing me, demanding answers to ridiculous lines of questioning, and saying awful things to my friends, acquaintances if I were with them. I tried to talk, reason, etc. with him, but it never helped. It would always end with him screaming at me from across parking lots, calling, texting me dozens of times, demanding to know where I was or where I was going, etc. And no one did anything about it. No one told this guy to fuck off or control himself, me included. I was starting to think I needed to get police involved, but I didn't know what I had to give them. My musician friends start texting me, telling me how they see this guy staggering around bars they're playing at, showing up with different girls and taking them home. Meanwhile, he is still talking and embarrassing me about our relationship. One Friday night, a month or two after we broke up, it's 3:30 a.m. and I am awoken from a deep sleep. My phone is ringing and it's him calling. I answer because I feel guilty about his earlier texts that indicate he might harm himself over all of this, just to make sure he's not hurt somewhere else. His voice sounds weird and hushed, and I can tell he's been drinking. The background of the call is very quiet. "Can I come over?" he asks. I ask where he is, and he tells me he is at a rest stop on the side of this major interstate. I knew this was not the case, because it is dead quiet on the other end of the line, and this highway is busy 24/7. I don't think that's such a great idea right now. It's late, I try to say calmly. I ask if he'd been drinking, and he insisted he wasn't drunk. I was getting creeped out, but I wanted to ensure he would leave me alone and not try anything further, especially at my place of residence. He starts crying these cringy fake tears, telling me how hard his life has been and how much he needs me, but still pushing to come to my house. I try to tell him no, but he keeps pushing. I don't give in to his fake sob story, and then his tone immediately changed to sharp, nasty aggression. I don't react to it, and then he just deadpan says he had to go and hung up. Maybe 30 seconds go by, I'm thinking to myself, what was that all about? And then I hear it. I hear the very distinct sound of his motorcycle start up about a block from my house. He owns a 95 Harley with straight pipes. Very specific sound that I was familiar with from riding with him in the past. My hair stood on end and I stopped breathing. The bike idled for maybe 30 more seconds, and then I heard him ride off, the sound slowly growing more faint as he rode away. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I was terrified I would hear the noise of the exhaust coming back, and I honestly did not know what I would do. I checked my phone and my other musician friend had texted me saying he was at their gig earlier that night getting very drunk. The gig was over an hour away from my house. He never came back that night, but I shudder to think what he would have done if I would have agreed to talk with him and let him come over. He harassed me a few more times, even telling my parents that he was going to marry me when they were down visiting for the week, and we were out at a public event that he also showed up at. I blocked his number, deleted my social media, and stopped going out. Turns out he started seeing some bartender in the city, and a few months later they got married. Then he stopped approaching me in public, but he will still hang out by my motorcycle at bike nights if I go, and he will make sure I know he is there. I guarantee his new wife has no idea about what this guy has done and what he was doing, all while the relationship was progressing. Just like I had no idea. To everyone reading this, trust your instincts, remain safe, avoid pain, enjoy life.
Tinder Nightmare, Stalker Edition. This happened to me my freshman year of college. Tinder was new, and everyone at my university was on the app. I joined to see what all of the fuss was about. Looking through profiles, I found a few guys that were really interesting, and this one guy in particular caught my eye. We will call him Walter. I swiped right on Walter and we matched. I was excited and kinda giddy because he was super attractive. He messages me and I get butterflies in my stomach. We message on the app for maybe an hour. Typical conversation is happening. I asked what he did for a living and he asked what my major was. Harmless conversation. After a while, he asked for my number so we could text instead of message on this app. I gave it to him. He seemed nice enough. We messaged back and forth for a few days. Lots of flirty conversation and plans to hang out finally occurred. By the fourth day of conversation, he started calling me babe, which gave me mixed feelings. It was cute, but also a little weird. We didn't really know each other and had never met. I ignored it and continued on with the conversation. He started saying he wanted to be exclusive and he really wanted to see me in person. He was begging me at this point to come to his apartment to cuddle and watch movies with him and his dog. I told him that our first meet needed to be in public. I would not be going to some stranger's apartment. He said I was overreacting and kept begging. I ignored him for the rest of the night. The next day he apologized and said he understood we needed to meet in public. So we made plans that weekend. The weekend came faster than I expected, and it was the day we were supposed to meet. Something just felt off and I decided to back out. I texted him apologizing, saying my mom wasn't feeling well and needed me to come home to help her with some house chores. This made him annoyed and he said, "Your mom is a big girl. If she needs you, she can call you. Just come over and you can leave whenever to go help her. I really want to see you and kiss you." I told him no, that I would be staying with my mom that weekend and that was that. I only lived about 30 minutes from home, so I actually did go home to see my mom that day. After what he said about my mom, I started ignoring him, and the texts started rolling in. Text after text. "Babe, I'm sorry, please come over. Babe, I miss you. Are you going to come over?" I planned on replying the next day that I was just busy with my mom. Then he started calling me. I had a total of 45 missed phone calls within a 2-hour period. He left voicemail saying he was sorry and he just missed me and wanted me to call him back. Similar voicemails continued almost the entire time I was home. My roommate texted me shortly after I finished dinner with my mom and asked if we could go out that night. I agreed and went back to my university dorm. Suddenly the calls from Walter started to increase again. More texts, voicemails, and he started messaging me again on Tinder, asking why I wasn't replying to him. I wasn't planning on replying until I got a message on Instagram that said, "Why didn't you tell me you were going back to town tonight?" Getting this message really freaked me out. I replied to him and said, "Sorry, I've been busy with my mom. How did you know I was back in town?" He said, "Well, I checked your Tinder, of course." Tinder doesn't tell exact locations, but has a within 1 mile message. This really freaked me out, and I messaged him back and said that he was really being creepy. He seriously had to be constantly refreshing my profile to see the distance change. The messages, calls, and voicemails continued. All were now him apologizing for making me feel weird about him knowing where I was. He was just worried about me. We had been texting for less than a full week. Less than a full week. I told my roommate about it, and so we decided to stay in that night. The last straw for me was getting a message saying, "Look, I'm really sorry. I'm outside your dorm with flowers and chocolates. Please forgive me." Oh, hell no. I called campus security and told them about this guy, and they never found anyone waiting outside any of the doors. I'm assuming he was in his car waiting for me to reply. I blocked him on all socials, phone number, deleted Tinder, and have never been back on since. I have seen him once out and about in the town, but he never recognized me, thankfully. Walter, if you ever read this, I'm glad we never met. Thanks for making me second guess every single guy I find attractive. Illuminati Tinder weirdo. For clarity, I am a straight 21-year-old female. So in November of 2016, I went through a pretty bad breakup. In October 2017, I finally felt comfortable enough to try to get back into the dating world. So like a moron, I got on Tinder, and it wasn't my first rodeo with Tinder. But this was the strangest thing to ever happen to me. So towards the end of October, I met a guy named Dave on Tinder. From the looks of it, he was an okay guy. He was funny and a gentleman. Didn't ask for anything inappropriate. It seemed fine. We talked for about 2 weeks and set up to go on a date. We decided to meet in the city where he had recently moved to, which was about 35 minutes away from my house. I got to the bar to wait for him, and he was about 15 minutes late. He walked in and looked relatively similar to his pictures. Like he was always on the verge of crying, very weird. He had some tattoos on his arm, including the all-seeing eye Illuminati symbol. Trying to break the tension, I jokingly said, "Illuminati confirmed. Tell me all your secrets." And he goes, "What the hell are you talking about? Don't say that kind of stuff in public." I just kind of laughed it off, and he was being really weird. He then says, "You know that people who pry are people who die." I just looked at him and I genuinely did not know how to respond. Fast forward about 20 minutes, and a couple of my friends came to the bar at my urging. I moved to sit on the same side as him so that my friends could sit on the same side of the booth. The minute I sit down, he puts his hands on my knee and squeezes. And not like, "Oh, I'm interested," but a hard fucking squeeze. I looked at him to stop, and he leans over and whispers, "You have lovely kneecaps." Like, boy, what? By the time my friends left, which was about an hour into the date, he had 7 beers. It was a Tuesday. As I go to close my tab, he stands behind me and he had a boner. Full-mast boner. I very quickly signed my receipt and stepped away. As I'm getting ready to say goodbye, it starts raining, and he then informs me that he walked to the bar from his house and asks for a ride home. Reluctantly, I agreed. And on the very short drive to his house, he informs me that it's not actually his house and that he is living in his sister's basement. When I finally park in front of his house, he leans over to kiss me, and I try to give him the cheek. And he physically turns my head and he puts his entire tongue in my mouth. And I pulled away, and this guy did it again. I finally pulled away and said, "Get the fuck out of my car." And he responds with, "I am in love with you. I knew from the moment I saw your pictures. You have to come inside and meet my sister and her husband." I told him that if he didn't get out of my car, I was calling the police. And he started tearing up and got out of my car. So weird boner Illuminati guy, let's not meet. He tried to abduct my friend. This happened about 2 years ago. I was hanging out with my friend Ivana at a bar in Manassas. It was around 9 p.m. and we were just chatting and getting a few drinks. She was telling me about a guy she'd been talking to on Tinder. She showed me his photos and a glimpse of their conversation. His name was Omar and he seemed like your average guy. He was pretty attractive. They've been talking for a few days now and haven't met up yet. She tried several times to get him to text her outside of the app, but he would give her the same excuse. I don't want to give out my number to a stranger I haven't met yet. It's a bit unusual, but totally understandable, so I told her that he's being smart. She was on looking at her phone for a few minutes and squealed. Oh my God. I started giggling and asked her, Jesus, what was that? Did he send you a dick pic or something? She laughed. No, but Omar wants to meet. I told her to go for it, and if she wants, I can leave. She said, he wants me to come over to his house. I immediately said, oh, hell no. She seemed to agree and continued to respond to Omar. I was now hesitant of leaving because a part of me is scared that she could change her mind. I told her to tell him to meet her at the hookah bar across the street. She thought it'd be weird to meet him with me with her. I told her I'd head over there and act like I didn't know her and just sit across from her. She just said okay and left. It was now 10:20 and it's been about 15 minutes since she left. I proceed to go across the street. I enter the hookah bar and after ordering my blueberry mint hookah, I looked around trying to find her. I saw her sitting at the table closest to the door across from Omar. I sat at the table across from them and started smiling from excitement because I found this whole thing so entertaining. I have a great view of her face and his back. Ivana seemed to be happy and laughing while talking to him. She was really cute. I got my hookah and just sat there playing with my phone. I was texting my boyfriend and telling him what was going on. While I was mid-typing, I got a text from Ivana. Amy, I don't know about this. I looked up and saw her face. She seemed pretty uncomfortable. Being the nosy-ass friend that I was, I asked, "What's wrong?" She answered, "He keeps asking me to come home with him." I smirked and responded, "Oh, he's trying to get some." She wasn't looking at her phone for a couple of minutes, and I saw her stand up. She smiled at him and headed towards the bathroom. She called me. "Amy, I need to fucking leave now." The smile disappeared from my face and I started to worry. She seemed genuinely scared. Whoa, what's going on? He asked me like 10 times to come over, and when I kept saying no, he laughed and said, "Don't make me kidnap you." He's probably joking, but I don't know. He's probably joking, but that's still creepy. Amy, what do I do? I was about to answer when I saw Omar get up and walk towards the bathroom. I thought he was just going to the men's restroom, but that's when shit got weird. He stopped right outside the ladies' room and put his ear to it. "Ivana, don't say anything else. He's right outside your door." At this point, I knew something is definitely wrong with this guy, and we need to get the hell out of there. He took his ear off the door and sat back down at the table. I reassured her that things are going to be okay because I was here and that we'll leave soon. Ivana came out of the bathroom shortly after and sat down in her seat. After a couple more minutes of forced awkward conversation between them, it was time to leave. I saw them get up to pay and walk out the door. I got up to pay, then left. I walked by the both of them standing at the front and just went straight to my car. I just watched them from my car, making sure she was okay. I couldn't hear anything, but from what I could tell, she seemed to be fake smiling and I think trying to leave. She pulled out her phone and I saw him snatch it. He held it in the air, laughing as she was trying to grab it back. He then started to walk backwards towards a blue car I assumed was his. She wasn't smiling anymore, and her face was clearly upset. I rolled down my window to listen since now there are only a couple of cars in front of me. "Stop playing around, give me back my phone." "Get in the car, Ivana." "What? Fuck no." Give me back my phone. Get in the car now. I can see her crying now, and all I could think was this has gone on for long enough. I jumped out of my car and called my boyfriend. I walked straight to them, and with my boyfriend on speakerphone, I yelled at him, "Give her her fucking phone and get the fuck out of here." He seemed startled and asked me who I was. Ivana was shaken up at this point, but all I could feel was rage. I'm her friend, and I've been here the whole time. My boyfriend is on his way. If you don't give her her phone back and leave before he gets here, then I swear to God you're going to be fucked. He handed her her phone back and started laughing. I was just joking around, Jesus. He got in his car and left. I finally calmed Ivana down and let her spend the night at my place. We thought about calling the police, but we saw that he deleted his Tinder. I was upset that my dumbass didn't bother to get his license. I'm not even sure if Omar was his real name. She told me that she paid for the hookah, so we didn't even have his credit card info. I've learned a lot of things from this scary situation in my life. This taught me that unless you know someone very well, always meet in public, and it never hurts to have a friend close by.